What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. How are we all getting on? How is the form? And here we go then. The All-Ireland football semi-final weekend is officially here. And what a weekend it poses to be, lads. I mean, we have got some cracking games in order between Kerry and Tyrone, Donegal and Meath. And of course, let's not forget the Tailteann Cup final that's taking place this weekend as well between Limerick and Kildare. We've even got the All-Ireland Junior Football Championship taking place on Friday evening and going on into the weekend as well. So some even more football happening this weekend if you are interested. But look, we are going to be here to preview both of the All-Ireland semi-finals. We are going to talk about the Tailteann Cup as well because a massive game, obviously huge implications. The winner going into the All-Ireland series for 2026. And yeah, mad to think we're down to 4 teams. And, you know, mad to think we've actually got very few weekends left of inter-county GAA. When you look at it, you know, we already know who's going to be in the All-Ireland final. In terms of hurling, and then after this weekend we're going to be down to 2 teams in All-Ireland football. You know, the minor football championship is done, the under-20 football championship is done, the ladies football you know, we'll shrink down to even lesser teams obviously going into next weekend. Camogie, we're obviously down to 4. So yeah, before we know it, you know, in a month's time it's going to be all said and done for 2025, which is a little bit sad, isn't it? Because it's such a long gap to January. We didn't have that much of a gap, didn't we, when the All Irelands used to end in September. But you know, whether it's a good thing that the All Irelands are being rushed quicker so we can focus on clubs, or whether they should look to extend it out longer, it is kind of hard to know, and it's probably a conversation for another day. But look, we're going to be here to preview and predict 3 of the games. We're not really going to touch on the Junior Football Championship games, unfortunately, lads. I'm going to be honest. Don't really know a huge amount about the players that are going to be involved and everything else. And usually it's not the same New York team, for example, that would have played against Mayo, which is a shame because I would love to see the Junior Football Championship actually get a little bit more sort of notoriety and credibility, and for the Junior Football Championship to actually properly mean something and become a competition, maybe a bit like the Tailteann Cup a little bit. But look, you know, again, probably another conversation for another day. So look, we are going to be discussing the Tailteann Cup and both of the All-Ireland semi-finals. For anyone who's new around here, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, it would very much help the channel out. And do let us know in the comments as well your predictions for some of these weekend's games, because yeah, look, I mean, my predictions in the quarterfinals, I got 3 out of 4 correct. The one I got wrong in terms of Kerry Armagh, I got miserably wrong. So let's see how many we get right this weekend. So we're going to start with Limerick versus Kildare in the Tailteann Cup. So let's go. All right, so as we were saying earlier, I mean, look, the Tailteann Cup does have huge implications for both of these 2 counties. The winner goes into the All-Ireland series for next year, which is absolutely huge. I mean, it's always huge, of course, for any county. It feels even more for either one of these 2. I mean, for Limerick, it feels like, I mean, it's going to be tough for them in Division 3 next year. I mean, look, after how well they've played this year, you wouldn't rule out a chance of promotion. Look, last time they got promoted to Division 3, they got promoted again up to Division 2, so who's to rule that one out? But to be in the All-Ireland series next year for a county like Limerick, whilst, look, you look at Clare and you think, could it hamper Limerick? I'm not sure, but at the same time, it could also be the benefit to them. You have to look at a team like Meath, who've used the Tailteann Cup brilliantly, and I think the same should also apply for Kildare, who probably are looking at the likes of Meath, who were in a very similar position to them a couple of years ago in the Tailteann Cup final, and look at how much they've grown as the years have gone on. And I think Kildare are in a very similar position right now in terms of the young talent that are coming through. And look, focusing in on Kildare and in particular on Brian Flanagan, look, it's been an impressive season, you'd have to say, by Kildare, getting promoted from Division 3, coming through some tough games as well in the Tailteann Cup, in particular that quarter-final versus Offaly. They have to dig it out versus Fermanagh as well. And look, Kildare have shown a bit of maturity. They've certainly bounced back quite a lot from last year. It's been, look, it hasn't been perfect. You had that defeat to Clare, obviously, in the league. They lost the Division 4 or the Division 3 final to Offaly. But look, we know the talent of some of the more senior players, of Kevin Feely, Daniel Flynn, Darragh Kirwan, albeit still a very young footballer, has been around the block for Kildare for a couple of years. But it's been the likes of James McGrath coming in, Colm Dalton, Brian McLaughlin. Like, these lads have just really added a little bit more, I think, to this Kildare side. And look, they've a tremendous amount of talent. Like, Kildare have had a great amount of underage success over the last couple of years. Young players making the breakthrough. You have the likes of Ryan Sinky as well as an example. So like there's good times coming for Kildare. And I think winning a Tailteann Cup and getting that All-Ireland series guaranteed for next year will take the pressure off them ever so slightly. And look, especially as I'm saying before, when you do look at how the Leinster Football Championship is going to be looking going into 2026, I mean, Dublin haven't looked as vulnerable as this. And I know they'll have a new manager next year, but they haven't looked as sort of as vulnerable as this probably since the early 2000s. Do you know what I mean? And there's an opportunity there for we saw Louth win Leinster this year, but there's an opportunity for a Meath next year. There's an opportunity for a Kildare as well. So to get over the line in the Tailteann Cup and taste silverware, I think will be absolutely massive for the likes of Brian Flanagan in his first season as well as Kildare manager. Be absolutely huge. But look, Limerick will be waiting in the wings, and Limerick have been the sort of the brilliant underdogs, you would say, this year. I don't think anybody could have predicted at the start of the year that they would get to a Tailteann Cup final. I think it's massive credit to Jimmy Lee and the work that he has done. And I listened to him actually on an interview on FM Chats about a week ago, and so positive about Limerick football, so praising of the players, and such belief, and you can see why the players want to run an absolute mile for him. And I think the job he's done has been nothing short of incredible, really. To think about the problems that Limerick had, like obviously under Billy Lee, things were flying under Limerick. He obviously steps away. You had Ray Dempsey coming in, that went absolutely south. A couple of other managers, and then eventually it falls back to Jimmy Lee to come in, and it's taken a year or so to sort of turn the tide. They were on a very, very bad run in terms of a losing streak last year, but they've been able to turn it around and to be promoted from Division 4, to be champions, and beat a very, very good Wexford side in the process. Come through their group, beating the likes of Westmeath. It's been very, very impressive. And look, they've got a lot of those senior players who were sort of a part of the Billy Lee era back in the team, the likes of Ian Corbett, the likes of Danny Neville, Josh Ryan, who tore his ACL, I think, a couple of years ago, or might have broken his leg or something of that nature. A very, very serious injury. He was actually a full forward at the time. He's now playing as a goalkeeper, and he's, kicking some brilliant points as well from the likes of 45s and 2-pointers and whatnot. So yeah, huge amount of optimism around Limerick football. Like it is a free hit in many ways. Nobody will be expecting them to win this game. And look, to be fair to Limerick, they've dealt with every sort of scenario that's gone their way. Look, they would have been disappointed earlier in the year with the defeat to Cork in the Munster Football Championship, but the progress that they've made has been nothing short of remarkable and going into Division 3. And look, in terms of the game itself and in terms of how it's going to play out, look, I think it's going to be a little bit cagey to begin with. I honestly do think Limerick are going to ruffle Kildare's feathers, and there's going to be moments in this game where it looks like Limerick are going to get the job done and get over the line. And I can actually see a scenario in the second half where maybe Limerick are 2-3 points up, going into the final 20-25 minutes. And it'll be interesting to see how Kildare respond to that, because it is a young team as well, and it is a team that haven't faced adversity that much. And like when they have faced adversity a lot of the times this year and over the last couple of years, they haven't been able to come through it, especially the more senior players. Obviously the younger players have had success in the under-20s, but I do think if Kildare play their best football, they should have enough to come through this, in my opinion. I'm expecting a big performance from Daniel Flynn in Croke Park, because he always tends to turn up in Croke Park, and this is the type of game that I think, with the TV cameras on and everything else, he could really, really step it up. I'm looking at Kevin Feely as well. You're looking at Alex Byrne, who I think is one of the more underrated players in this Kildare team. So in terms of a prediction, I'm going to go Kildare 119, Limerick 18 points. I'm going to say it's a 4-point win for Kildare. I think it's going to go back and forth in the first half. I think Limerick are going to have a moment in the second half where they're going to be 2 or 3 up. But I think going into the final 10 to 15 minutes, especially with some of the players that Kildare can bring off the bench as well, I think they will have enough to win it. And I think they're going to be the Tailteann Cup champions for 2025. Moving on to the All-Ireland football semi-finals then, and we'll start off with Kerry versus Tyrone in Croke Park. And goodness gracious me, I mean, what a game this poses to be, especially when you look at the history of Kerry and Tyrone down the years. I mean, you look back through the 2000s and some of these games, the All-Ireland finals in 2005 and 2008. You think back at the semi-final in 2003, and even more recently as well, like some of the brilliant games we've had. Kerry Tyrone in 19 was a great game. Of course, the game in 2021 as well. So it's it's two counties that certainly do love to dish up a great bit of history and do pretend to produce some brilliant games. And so often, it is actually Tyrone who so often upset the odds, just like they did in 2021, just like they did throughout the majority of the 2000s. Like, don't get me wrong. Look, I do think Kerry will win this game. I am going to say that straight off the bat after the performance that they produced versus Armagh. I mean, that second half performance, as I've said before, like that final half an hour of the game was one of the best performances I've seen in Croke Park. Look, and I wasn't there at the game. I was away on holiday, but like watching it on the TV, you were almost in disbelief kind of watching it. You were like, goodness me, like this is absolutely incredible the way that they're playing football here. David Clifford was doing his thing, but Sean O'Shea came alive and, producing one of his best performances of the year, if not his best performance. You had Micheál Burns coming off the bench, who was running rings around players. And you were like, where on earth has this been? Like, this was absolutely insane. Paddy Clifford coming off the bench as well. Even young Evan Looney as well, who came on, I thought had a very good game. Like, Kerry were absolutely brilliant. And to do that to the All-Ireland football champions, look, if Kerry play like that against Tyrone, it'd be very, very hard to see how Tyrone can stop that. In saying that, though, I don't think Tyrone would be as naive. I think if Tyrone found themselves in the same scenario in terms of kick out with Ethan Rafferty, I don't think they just go straight, keep going long, hitting it in the same space, rushing kick outs. I think Tyrone would be a lot more clever to kind of slow it down. Look, I would have thought Armagh would have done the same as well, to be fair. But I think Tyrone would have used a little bit more street smarts in that kind of scenario. I would like to think so anyway. And I think Tyrone as well, like Armagh's midfield was way off against Kerry. Like, they really, really struggled. And that was an area that we thought Armagh would dominate. Be very curious to see how the likes of Joe O'Connor and so on can do up against a strong midfield in Con Kilpatrick and Brian Kennedy, because when they're on it, they're absolutely brilliant as well. And you saw the influence they had in the game versus Dublin. And look, Tyrone have some serious firepower. I mean, we saw it in the first half versus Dublin, where I don't think they were necessarily brilliant in that game, but they were able to kick some brilliant two-pointers from the likes of Darren McCurry, Dara Canavan, Peter Hart as well, Kieran McGeary. So with players like that, even Noah Morgan as well, kind of chipping away from frees and 45s and everything else. So that could be a real, like, that could certainly hurt Kerry. And it suits Tyrone. Look, it suits Tyrone to be written off. It suits them to be, for the hype to be around Kerry now. And the roles have kind of reversed a little bit from the Kerry-Armagh game. I wouldn't say Tyrone are being written off. I don't think they're being written off in the same way that Kerry were being wrote off versus Armagh. But there certainly is a lot of people who think this will be a foregone conclusion and this will be straightforward. And I've seen a lot of people say the same about Donegal Meath as well. I don't think the same for that game either. But you do look at Kerry and, listening to Jack O'Connor as well, sort of post-match, and his press conference and how vocal he was about how much he felt that Kerry were being wrote off. Like, Kerry looked angry. They looked, pissed off by what people said, and they showed that on the pitch. And you just look at it and think it'd be very, very hard for that Tyrone defence to be able to stop the likes of David Clifford, the likes of Sean O'Shea, Paddy Clifford, who I think will start in this game as well. Does Micheál Burns now start after a brilliant cameo? That'll be interesting to see. Killian Spillane maybe coming off the bench. I'm not too sure how Tyrone deal with that. It was interesting because, like, when you actually go back and watch the Armagh-Kerry game, and I did watch it back, and, it's mental because for about 40 minutes, 35 minutes, Armagh did a brilliant job on Clifford. They kept them very, very quiet. I think he'd scored 1 point from play from that point. And other than Sean O'Shea, who was left free for the majority of that match, which probably wasn't the most wisest decision, I thought Armagh were actually doing quite well. So it'll be interesting to see what Tyrone's approach is. And look, with Kerry as well, is that, for as good as they were against Armagh, there has been inconsistencies in their performances this year. Let's not forget, there was a lot of Kerry fans even who didn't think that performance was possible. And I think when Jack O'Connor was speaking out about people questioning Kerry, it was also, speaking to his own fans as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the turnout is like from Kerry fans. I would expect them to show up in numbers, especially after that recent performance. So it's going to be interesting to see. Look, in terms of how the game is going to go, I said it there, I do think Kerry will win the game. Look, I think this is going to be an old-fashioned humdinger of a game of Gaelic football. Like, I think both teams are going to come out of this with a huge amount of credibility. I think Kerry will beat Armagh. I'm going to go a 3-point win. 126 to 123 is going to be my prediction there. I just think Kerry will have a little bit more going down the home stretch. I also wouldn't be entirely surprised if this game went to extra time. I think it's going to be one of them games where, even though Tyrone lose, like with it being the first year of Malachy O'Rourke, the success of the under-20s and obviously the minors as well, like Tyrone football is going in a brilliant place, and they're certainly not going to go anywhere. And if anything, if Tyrone can get over the line and beat Kerry, it puts them in a fantastic position to do something that no other side than Kerry has done since 1975. But I do think that Kerry's attacking firepower, the way that they played, the intent that they played with versus Armagh, I just think they'll carry it into this game, in my opinion. I can't see anything other than them playing with confidence and a bit of exuberance. Like if they underperform a little bit in this match, you'd be questioning a little bit, like, how has that happened? How have they stepped it up a gear and then dropped it down again? So no, I think Kerry will have enough. But I said at the same time, I don't think this will be a poor performance by Tyrone. I think it'll be one of them games where every time we think Kerry are going to pull away, Tyrone will just keep with them and stick with them and bang over 2-pointers, maybe bring an old Mackle home off the bench, and he might be able to make it a bit of a difference, like what we saw in the game versus Dublin as an example. So I think Tyrone will come out with a lot of praise as well, but I am going to go with Kerry by the smallest of margins. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if Tyrone did win this. That then leaves Donegal versus Meath as the last semi-final to discuss. And lads, isn't it just absolutely mental that Meath football are in an All-Ireland semi-final? I mean, could you imagine a year ago when Meath were being hammered by Dublin by 16 points and then lost to Kerry by 17 points, that they would go and not only beat both of them in the championship in 2025, but beat Galway, who were within a whisker of the All-Ireland twice in the last 3 years? Like, it's nothing short of remarkable. And I honestly, genuinely do believe Robbie Brennan is the manager of the year this year. And I think, part of me thinks, look, maybe if Donegal win the All-Ireland, Jim McGuinness will get it. But I think Robbie Brennan is a man who deserves it, to be honest with you, for the job that he has done, for the way he's turned this team around from last season under Colm O'Rourke. If Meath were in the Tailteann Cup last year, I don't even think they would have won it, to be honest with you. Do you know what I mean? So that's how good that Robbie Brennan has been able to turn this around. And credit to the players as well. The players have really stepped it up. The younger players have come in who've been brilliant. And a lot of the existing players who we've always said have had potential, like Jordan Morris and Matthew Costello, these kind of players have really, really kind of stepped it up a notch, to be fair. I'm not going to lie, look, as a Dublin fan, I obviously don't want Meath to win this weekend. I didn't want them to win versus Galway. I did actually back them to beat Galway in terms of a prediction. I certainly didn't want it to happen as a Dublin fan, and I certainly don't want it to happen this weekend. Just like Meath fans, wouldn't have wanted to see Dublin beat Tyrone or anything like that. Of course, this is what rivalry is all about, in fairness. And but I think they're a very enjoyable team to watch. They play football brilliantly. I think they're one of the teams that have made use of the new rules absolutely brilliantly. I think the likes of Sean Rafferty at the back as well has been phenomenal. And Meath football is in a really, really healthy position. And I've said it in previous videos. I think a bit like Tyrone, regardless of what happens in this game, I don't think Meath get hiding in this game or anything like that, like people are suggesting. I think they'll stick with Donegal to the very, very end. But I think they're in a great place. And, for them to have gotten to a semi-final in the first place is absolutely phenomenal. And if they can go and beat Donegal, I think then you would start to think that, Sam could potentially be going back to Meath, which, Jesus, lads, even saying that really, really frightens me, like, fucking hell. In saying that, though, you can't take anything away from this Donegal side. And look, Kerry stole the show of the weekend with their performance versus Armagh and turning it around. But look, Donegal did very similar. They were 7 points down at halftime versus Monaghan, and their second half performance, I mean, in terms of attacks, I think they nearly had 90% accuracy in that second half. They were absolutely brilliant. Micheál Langan, I think, is a shoe-in for an all-star, maybe in the conversation for Footballer of the Year. We know how good Micheál Murphy is, and in terms of the players that he can set up and everything else. So there's some phenomenal footballers. Oisin Gallen has really stepped it up over the last couple of games. Kieran Thompson has been brilliant as well. So Donegal's firepower just feels like, to me, they will have a bit more. Look, Galway, they did underperform quite a bit against Meath. There's no doubt about it. Look, a lot of it was down to Meath and how well they coped defensively. But I think the writing had been on the wall for Galway for quite a bit of time, in my opinion. I thought they got away with it a little bit versus Down. they came through a very intense group as well. They got beat by Dublin, who, as I've said previously, I don't think are, the Dublin of old. And that was a result that surprised everyone, including me. So, like, I just can't see Donegal making the same mistakes. And I don't think they'll take their foot off the gas here. And even if they do fall 3, 4, 5 points down, which, look, does tend to happen a lot against this Meath side, because they can get a run on you. And with players like Rory Kinsella and Connor Duke and Jordan Morris, they can kick 2-pointers and they can put you under a lot of pressure. But I still think that Donegal's firepower, especially around the middle as well, Finbar Rorty kind of racing up from wing back as well. In terms of a prediction then, and in terms of my score prediction for this game, I'm going to go Meath 215, Donegal 120, or maybe the other way around if you want to hear the side I think that will win in the scoreline first. So Donegal 120, Meath 215. Look, I think it'll be very, very close. I think Meath will get a couple of goals. They'll really, really stick it to Donegal, but I think Donegal will just have a little bit more firepower coming down the home stretch. I think Jim McGuinness, look, we saw some of the tactical tweaks he made in the game versus Monaghan as well. Monaghan didn't have the same influence in terms of kickouts, in terms of their intensity that they had in the second half. And I think Jim McGuinness and his management team will be able to sort of outdo Robbie Brennan tactically throughout the game. But look, Meath could win the game. I would be more surprised if Meath won this than Tyrone beating Kerry. And that's not a discredit to Meath. I just think that the standard now is, just that bit higher, in my opinion. And I think Donegal are, for me, probably the top two. And look, I think Donegal and Kerry, you would have to say right now, are the top two in the country. Maybe Tyrone are 3, Meath are 4. If you were to kind of do a power rankings of the semi-finals. But look, if Meath can go and beat Donegal, that look, they'll be in the final, so people will be talking about Sam already, but you might even nearly start making them favourites. I don't really know, but look, I do think Donegal will do enough to win the game. As I said, their firepower in terms of attack, especially when you're able to bring players like Patrick McBrearty off the bench. I mean, like, to be able to bring him off the bench is just, it must be so demoralising for opposition defenders to see a player of his quality to come off the bench and make an impact. So, I'm going to go for a Donegal victory. As I'm saying right there, we're going to go for a 2-point win for Donegal. So a very narrow win, but I think they will come through it. But there we have it then. There are my predictions for this weekend's All-Ireland Football semi-finals and the Tailteann Cup. Do let me know your thoughts, your opinions on the weekend's game. Throw in your predictions for the Junior Football Championship if you would like as well. And let me know if you'll be going to the games and everything else. Looking forward to watching them. Probably won't be going to the games this weekend to save the old cash, in fairness, but I will certainly be watching them, and we'll be doing reactions and plenty of content and everything else when those when they happen. So cheers anyone who tuned in. If you could hit the like button and subscribe, it would be very much appreciated. Let us know your predictions in the comments down below, and until the next one, we will speak to you all later.